That's breaking news for us here when it comes to that. Our Jonathan Jones confirming that this morning, and the deal is not quite done yet. The contract numbers are still being negotiated. However, it appears Harbaugh has chosen his suitor. He was fired, if you remember, by the Ravens not too long ago on January 6th, just after the new year, following Baltimore's season-ending loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was the winningest coach in franchise history, going 180-113 in that record there over 18 seasons. And don't forget that Super Bowl in 2013, named Coach of the Year in 2019. But when it comes to the Giants and where he's going now, take a look at it. It has been yuck. The past two seasons, of course, Brian Daboll was the head coach during that time. Weeks 1 through 16, just 4 wins. And then weeks 17 through 18, 3-1. Of course, the silver lining there kind of helped with the draft position. The reason why we've seen some of that young talent there in terms of the future. So we'll see how that pans out the rest of the way. All right, for more of that breaking news, the man himself, Jonathan Jones. I'm curious, JJ, what more can you tell us? Of course, it's happening overnight, but this morning, anything new there?
Yeah, so let's talk about overnight, since we're all just waking up. So the New York Giants courted John Harbaugh all day on Wednesday. Today's Thursday. They courted him all night on Wednesday and didn't want him to get on the plane and didn't want him to take the meeting with the Tennessee Titans, because here's what was going to happen. John Harbaugh was going to fly back to his home in the Baltimore area. Tennessee Titans and their brain trust were going to fly from Nashville to the Baltimore area. They were going to meet with John Harbaugh. They were going to give him their pitch. The Atlanta Falcons had spoken to him over the phone a few days ago for upwards of an hour and a half. And so the Giants had their opportunity with Harbaugh and didn't want to let him go. So I don't think fans necessarily care, nor should they care, about contract details. In fact, I don't know and won't know every contract detail that's being worked out, but the umbrella term of contract details are being currently worked out. He is going to be the head coach of the New York Giants. No one needs to fret about anything. There won't be contract breakdowns. It's going to happen. You don't get to this point and then things break down. So John Harbaugh will be the next head coach of the New York Giants.
All right, so while we wait for some of those details to come out, let's just talk about the relationship now when it comes to the Giants and Harbaugh. You have to think there had to be a few things appealing to him going to New York. Obviously, they struggled in the past, but they have some key pieces there. What were you thinking in terms of some things that maybe attracted him to the Giants?
Yeah, well, you're talking about a blue blood organization. And no, the Giants have not been winning recently, but they are a top-tier franchise, one of the most recognizable franchises, one of the most valuable sports franchises, not just in America, North America, but in the entire world. And so there's that. There is the perception, the idea of stability. Those men that you just saw right there, John Mara and Steve Tisch, would love for there to be stability within their organization, especially at the head coaching position. They yearn for the days of Tom Coughlin to be here. And so you get a guy who, I'm not going to argue his Hall of Fame merits, but obviously he has enough out there that could get him into the Hall of Fame. You get him, you pair him with a young quarterback in Jaxson Dart that clearly this organization believes in. And they believe that he's going to do a whole lot better than the 4 names under Tom Coughlin right there. So that is the allure. That is the appeal. You also consider the division, right? Up until this year, it hadn't been won by a team in consecutive years, which I think is sort of the proof that it is a winnable division, right? With all due respect to the Philadelphia Eagles, Dallas Cowboys, and Washington Commanders. Not saying it's going to be easy, but it is winnable for the New York Giants. And so there are pieces there, really important pillars, right? Again, quarterback, wide receiver in Malik Neighbors, left tackle in Andrew Thomas, pass rushers, and a whole bunch of dudes. Do they have holes to fill? Yes, of course, and we're going to get to that, I'm sure. But the premier positions, they have good young talent. They have an ownership group that wants stability, and clearly they're going to let you sort of have your run of things as head coach there.
You mentioned the young talent, of course, it starts with Jaxson Dart. That's the first person we all think about now with the Giants. And when he was in Baltimore, Harbaugh, that is, of course, looked pretty good with Lamar Jackson. A few MVPs on his trophy case there, along with that, and postseason runs. But when you think about Harbaugh and Jaxson Dart, his development, what does that relationship look like in terms of them moving forward with the Giants?
Yeah, I know there's a report out there that Jaxson Dart was meeting with Harbaugh. Yesterday was part of sort of the welcome wagon with the Giants, and so he's a guy who absolutely wants to be coached hard. We saw that last year with Brian Daboll, the relationship that Daboll had with Jaxson Dart. I'd also even point out that while there were injuries, certainly, Jaxson Dart got worse once Brian Daboll left. Not to say that to move on from Brian Daboll wasn't the right move, but it did have an impact on that organization with the quarterback who did not play as well as he did when Brian Daboll was there. So Harbaugh, obviously, he's had a couple young quarterbacks, right? He had Joe Flacco and won a world championship with him. He's had Lamar Jackson, and now he gets Jaxson Dart. Who's going to be his offensive coordinator? Todd Monken was just with the Baltimore Ravens. He's on the interview circuit right now for OC positions. One has to believe that he would be a top choice for John Harbaugh there with the Baltimore Ravens. They have a lot of really good defensive coaches as well. I'd be surprised if Zach Orr would come over as defensive coordinator, but potentially having a spot on that coaching staff. Now, look, they're hoping that Malik Neighbors is 100% healthy by the start of training camp, that he will be able to be healthy throughout 2026. They're going to have to figure out the slot corner position if they let Wan'Dale Robinson walk in free agency, and they're probably going to want to add a couple offensive linemen as well. But as far as the Giants, we've been talking about, are they one of the best jobs in the NFL? And without question, they are.
JJ, this may seem very simple, but how do you keep a Jaxson Dart very healthy? Because we talked about it all season long, the unnecessary hits that he took towards the end of the season. You mentioned there. And Harbaugh, of course, dealing with Lamar and all those injuries towards the end of this season. If you're Harbaugh, what are the first things you need to do to keep Jaxson Dart healthy, not just this year, but into the future as well?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's going to be really hard with words, right? Harbaugh can wish upon a star that Jaxson Dart won't get injured. And he can do, and they can institute drills, if you will, once we finally get to July's training camp. Until we get to September ball, right, and the red non-contact quarterback pennies come off, and he's playing in real games, you're not going to know. I mean, we've seen this time and again, unfortunately, with quarterbacks, young quarterbacks in the modern NFL the last 10, 15 years who, yeah, they want to use their legs and they put themselves in harm's way. And Jaxson Dart did just that. Jaxson Dart won't have a long career if he wants to play the quarterback position the way that he did his rookie season. That is clear and evident to anyone watching football. And so it is incumbent upon Jaxson Dart. I don't know what John Harbaugh can tell him. That's all on the young man. He's going to have to play smarter and better. You can be a hell of a coach, but if you won't step out of bounds when the white out of bounds line is right there, there's nothing John Harbaugh can do.
Dart has said he's going to continue to play the same way he's played in college, and that doesn't bode well on Sundays. You mentioned it there. I want to get to the front office with Joe Schoen because it seems like he has another leash on life, and now you have a Harbaugh in place to build around not just Dart, but also what he's looking for as a contender there. I want to take a look at the salary cap. Obviously, we mentioned the young talent, but in terms of room of potentially salary cap cuts for this, $14 million now. How does Joe Schoen build a contender when it comes to Harbaugh and what he's looking for?
Well, again, they have good young pieces at really important positions. So they're not out there trying to trade a second-round pick for a left tackle. They don't need a pass rusher. They don't need a quarterback. They don't need a number one wide receiver. So they have, about $12 million or so in cap space they're going to create, as we see right there. More cap space. They have the running backs, right? Tyrone Tracy, Cam Scadaboo. So, yeah, they got to pick up a corner. They got to pick up some offensive linemen. There's no doubt that they have needs, but this is not a desperate team when it comes to how it has been built or how it will be built. Again, the Giants were thought of across the NFL as one of the top jobs for a number of reasons, and I know that Joe Schoen, the general manager there, has caught a lot of flack, and he has deserved some of that flack. There's no doubt about that. But folks wanted him out. He was part of the group that just recruited John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh is about to take this job and work with Joe Schoen. Joe Schoen has helped recruit and bring in some of this great young talent that we're talking about, that we all agree on, that John Harbaugh has taken the job because of. So, Joe Schoen, I think, he won't get any credit until they start turning hypotheticals into victories. And I'm certain that he knows that. But while everyone has wanted to kind of shovel dirt on his grave, I do think it is important to note that Giants fans, you just landed the top head coach in the market, arguable to some, inarguable to myself, in part because of what Joe Schoen has been able to build there.
Yeah, the prize, as you mentioned there, has been Harbaugh. And if you're looking for, by the way, those cuts here, if they were to make that, that would clear $50 million. So you have some wiggle room there to build around what Harbaugh is looking for. I'm just curious. We talked about Joe Schoen and his impact on the recent draft classes. How much will Harbaugh have an impact on this year's class with him now coming in?
That's a great question, and it's something to be determined, right? And maybe that's something that has to be worked out in the fine print of the contract. Maybe that's something that has to be worked out over these next couple of months as they work together and go down to Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl and go to Indianapolis for the scouting combine and bring guys in for their 30 visits and all those things. Well, we don't know exactly how this dynamic is going to work, but John Harbaugh has never been confused for a top personnel man, right? So he's going to have his input. He's going to have his imprint on this team. That's what his resume calls for. That's what it commands. You've been a head coach for 18 years in this league. You have a Super Bowl and you've gone to a bunch of conference championship games. Well, you're going to get some say in the players that you ultimately coach. I do believe that Joe Schoen will remain in name, title, and all those things, general manager. But will John Harbaugh have some say, some direct say, a decent amount of say in the players that they bring on? Of course, but that would happen anywhere. That would happen if your general manager were tenured and had more success than Joe Schoen. That's just what you get when you are John Harbaugh.
Well, you know, you mentioned it there when it comes to the NFC East, it's a winnable division. So naturally, you would think the Giants, the window for maybe competing, is it 2 years, 3 years, turning this around? What are we thinking now that Harbaugh's in place?
Yeah, why wait?
Yeah.
Right? Why wait? Jacksonville Jaguars didn't have to wait. New England Patriots didn't have to wait. Right? The Chicago Bears didn't have to wait. You have an Eagles team that may be in a bit of chaos, who their number one wide receiver the last couple of years won't be their number one wide receiver in 2026. Who knows who their offensive coordinator is going to be? There's chaos even when they're winning there. The Dallas Cowboys, for whatever reasons, just can't seem to consistently field a winner. The Washington Commanders, great year one, really tough year two. So what's year three going to bring? And then again, the Giants, here we are. They are, again, talent at a lot of really important positions. Really good head coach. I know Giants fans are going to want to argue about if their head coach is the top head coach in the division or not. I'm not going to get into that. But this is a really good team. And I want to say something, Brandon, because remember all the hand-wringing the last couple weeks of the season about how the Giants absolutely should have tanked so that they could get a higher draft pick because the season's worthless and nothing else matters except a draft pick. Who cares about the damn draft pick right now? Who honestly cares that the Giants don't have the number 1 or number 2 overall pick? Who really cares that Jaxson Dart didn't go throw a game to the Las Vegas Raiders, who were actively not trying to win that game right now? You got John Harbaugh. You have a chance to turn this thing around. You have a top 5 pick. None of that mattered then. It was ridiculous. It was radio show fodder. And now here we are today. You land the big fish. And he didn't say, gosh, guys, if you just had that number 1 or 2 pick, I'd be there. But I'm going to take this call with the Tennessee Titans. No, it was ridiculous then. It's ridiculous now. Let's remember that in about 11 months when we had this exact same conversation about a different team in 2026.
Now, you know Ryan Wilson's going to blow your phone up because he cares about that pick there. So watch it now. R-Dub is going to jump into slack for you right there. By the way, for the turnaround, we're talking about Harbaugh with the Ravens in 2008, 11-5. 4 years later, that Super Bowl championship, 10-6 team. So quick turnaround there. Last one for you here, JJ. In terms of obviously Harbaugh being the first domino, how does this affect others with those openings and coaches out there looking for new homes?
Yeah, that's a great question, because what I can tell you is so many NFL teams and so many coaching candidates, guys who have been interviewing these last 10 or so days, they have all been waiting on Harbaugh. So now that domino has truly fallen. And we don't know what the second one is, right? We don't know who will be the next one. But the Giants were well positioned because they had fulfilled league requirements by bringing in 2 external minority candidates for interviews that they could hire Harbaugh or whomever as early as Sunday night. I don't think, looking at this right now, that any other team has fulfilled that requirement. So until you get to that, you can't hire anyone. But now we're going to start seeing things begin to develop. And obviously, the Steelers are just now getting started We're still all waiting on a resolution with the Green Bay Packers. In talking with sources, they believe the longer this goes with Green Bay and no smoke coming out, that it seems more likely than not that Matt LaFleur would return as Green Bay Packers head coach, because if not, the Packers would want to hop into the pool at some point and start speaking to some candidates. Obviously, this upcoming weekend's games are going to impact when guys can talk to teams. And then on January 19th, you can begin to bring in-person interviews with coaches who are currently employed by other NFL teams. So I'd be surprised right now, unless a Mike McCarthy gets hired somewhere, that we see another head coach hired before January 19th. So that's on Monday. We may have a quiet weekend with a few more interviews, but in terms of hires, I don't think anything's going to happen until early next week.
JJ, about 30 seconds here. Give me one team that is upset that Harbaugh's off the board. Maybe like a Tennessee Titans who had a meeting plan, obviously canceled now.
Yeah, the Titans, the Atlanta Falcons, they were considered, and we had reported that they were going to be in the top three, and the top three whittled down to one. But that doesn't mean that those guys don't still have options. They still feel really good about their options. Just they did want to have an audience with John Harbaugh, and, of course, the New York Giants wouldn't allow it.
All right, Jonathan Jones, there he is. Of course, appreciate you with that breaking news with Harbaugh finalizing a deal to be the next head coach of the New York Giants. When it comes to Harbaugh, of course, we talk about the Super Bowl and everything he has done for Baltimore. Well, now he's taking his talents to the Giants. Maybe a quick turnaround. Remember, I mentioned the first 4 years of Super Bowl there when it came to the Ravens. Could the Giants get back with the G-men there? We'll see. On the other side, Charles Davis tapping in on Harbaugh heading to the Big Apple. We're continuing that breaking news this morning from last night. John Harbaugh taking his talents from Baltimore to New York to be the head coach of the Giants. They're still working on finalizing that deal. Our Jonathan Jones confirming that news this morning. Obviously, the contract numbers are still being negotiated. However, it appears that he is the new guy when it comes to the Giants there. Remember, he was fired from the Ravens back on January 6th, not too long ago, after they lost that game to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But he is the winningest coach when it comes to the Ravens, and that bodes well for the Giants because look at the last four guys. I'm not even going to include Tom Coughlin because he has Super Bowls there and 102 wins. McAdoo, Shermer, Joe Judge, and Brian Dable obviously did not work out. Just look at those winning percentages. But what you get at Harbaugh, guess what? You got some winning ways, and nobody feeling better than that man right there when it comes to the Giants. Charles Davis tapping in this morning on this breaking news. And CD, your reaction to this obviously happening overnight, but obviously the news is still coming out this morning. Big news, little deal. What do you think?
It's big news, but it's also confirming news, I think, Brandon, because I don't think any of us who are involved in all of this, right, in whatever level, whether you're a fan, whether you're someone who's an insider, if it's Jonathan Jones who has all the information before the rest of the world has it, I don't think this is a surprise. Like, this was the number one target, number one fit from the moment it was announced John Harbaugh had been let go by the Baltimore Ravens. The only thing that maybe stirred it up a little bit was when Mike Tomlin resigned. Did Mike Tomlin want to enter the sweepstakes? Were the Giants going to be interested in Mike Tomlin entering the sweepstakes? The Rooney and the Mara families, all that working together. But it doesn't appear like Coach Tomlin's headed towards coaching again this year. So that means that John Harbaugh remained the number one target, and this fit seemed right from the beginning.
We know why the Giants love Harbaugh. Of course, the resume, 180 wins in 18 seasons, a Super Bowl. But I'm curious from your perspective, what attracted him to the Giants? We talked about their struggles the past couple of years. What did he like, do you think, from New York?
I think a number of things. First and foremost, coach is coach, Brandon.
Yep.
All right, that's just who they are. And, he was raised in it. His dad, Jack Harbaugh, longtime college coach, won a national championship at Western Kentucky in 1AA. His brother Jim, himself. Heck, his brother-in-law, Tom Crean, a very successful college basketball coach. This is what they do. So he was looking for a place to go coach. Number two, it is New York. And they have not had much success lately. But if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, and you know that. And if he can get the Giants back to their former glory, and let's be honest about it, you're not a head coach in this league unless you have a healthy ego. And John Harbaugh, of course, believes he can get them back to where they were, back to Tom Coughlin days where they're competing for and winning Super Bowls again. And last but not least, there's a quarterback in place that you've got to like in Jaxson Dart. and that's a great starting point for him. And last but not least, B, the defense. He's got guys who can go get people on the defensive side of the ball. He'll need a coordinator to put it all together, and they have to quit blowing late leads. But he's got some guys who know how to go get the quarterback. So this is going to be fun to watch how it all comes together for John Harbaugh.
I want to get to Dart in a second, but I want to get back to what you mentioned there, Tom Coughlin, the glory days when it comes to the Giants, those Super Bowls that are still there at the facility. This is a culture change because the last 4 or 5 guys that were there obviously didn't have the resume that Harbaugh has over 18 seasons, but now this is a guy that is coached and he has led his teams into the postseason. How would that culture change there for New York?
Yeah, the only one on the list, Brandon, that had multiple head coaching jobs was Pat Shurmur. Everyone else coached and has not been a head coach again on any level, I don't believe. So you're talking about bringing in a guy. Remember, Tom Coughlin had raised the Jacksonville Jaguars from day one and made them a team that went to AFC championship games. So he knew how to win. Then he adjusted himself in New York, where he had to learn how to totally get along with his team and get the best out of them, and he did. John Harbaugh has that capacity as well. He is a guy, and I hate to use the term players coach because that implies that the players run everything. No, I think he's a guy who's in tune with his team. Even when we heard him being fired in Baltimore, people tried to make the case that he had lost the locker room. I don't think that was anywhere close to the case at all. He had not lost the locker room. Did guys have different ways they might want to do things? Sure, but everyone does. I think his ability to connect is huge, and it's really going to be huge, Brandon, in his ability to connect with Jaxson Dart. Why? Brian Daboll wanted Jaxson Dart as much as you wanted whatever you wanted for the holidays, okay? He got him as his quarterback. They connected on every level. John Harbaugh needs to connect with his quarterback as Brian Daboll did, and I have no doubts that he will. But when he does that, now you can get things going, get things started again.
We've seen him, of course, groom some young guys over the years. Joe Flacco, of course, helping them get into that Super Bowl. Lamar Jackson, multiple MVPs, and part of the playoff contention there in the AFC, and now Jaxson Dart. And I was going to ask you about that. The one thing we remember about Jaxson Dart, Brian Daboll, is him poking his head in the tent that one time and trying to get him out there. That's a relationship you don't see too often from a young guy and a head coach. How would Harbaugh kind of build that relationship with Dart in one, protecting himself, and then also being a big-time leader for this team?
Yeah, I think in everything that you just talked about, and really starting with being a leader and what you need from your quarterback and how to do it. You mentioned a number of guys that have played under him, you know, that have been the big timers. Flacco winning the Super Bowl, Lamar Jackson being a multiple-time MVP. But think about when those guys weren't playing, other people who played the position, and they found a way to stay afloat during that time and still compete for division titles, playoffs, trying to get to the Super Bowl. Okay, Trace McSorley came in and played for him for a while. Stoop Huntley, what iteration of Stoop Huntley are we getting right that's come back and played for him? He knows how to connect with these people. It'll be daily meetings. It'll be daily check-ins. It'll be just time spent out on the practice field. He's not going to be a head coach who's going to turn his quarterback totally over to the offensive coordinator and quarterback coaches. He will have that relationship where that quarterback knows the head coach is invested in him, and he hopes that the quarterback, you know, and he will be invested in the quarterback. So it's going to be fun to watch. And the best teams that we know out there, doesn't matter if the head coach is a defensive background guy or an offensive background guy. If you invest in your quarterback and you have that relationship, look at Mike Vrabel and Drake May year one in New England.
Oh, okay, that's a good one there. Jonathan Jones actually mentioned, too, during the meeting last night, you did have Dart there with Harbaugh to kind of welcome him in. That's what J.J. told us early on. That's not the only relationship he has to build. Joe Schoen, I mentioned with J.J., that's a new leash on life for Mr. Schoen there, trying to rebuild. How does that bond kind of grow as they try to build a contender through the draft and also free agency?
I'm eager to watch it because, Brandon, you've reported, right? Jonathan reported, and you've transmitted it, that they're finalizing the details for John Harbaugh, correct? So we're waiting for the contract to finish, et cetera. I'm wondering if John Harbaugh is asking for more say in personnel than maybe he had in Baltimore. I don't know that he is or if he isn't, but think about the structure he had in Baltimore. Incredibly stable ownership. Steve Bisciotti taking over there, and that was his guy for all those years, right? How about the GM position? Ozzie Newsome is going to be a Hall of Fame GM, just as he was a Hall of Fame tight end. Eric DeCosta, trained under Ozzie, has been the GM. He's going to be a Hall of Fame GM. And year in and year out, do we always praise Baltimore for their drafting acumen and their free agency acquisitions? The answer is yes. John Harbaugh coached a team working with that type of stable relationships. Now, you have the ownership, which has been the Mara family forever, so that's not an issue. Joe Shane, we've had that conversation many times. Is he the guy? Is he not the guy? Will John Harbaugh ask for more of a say in what he's doing? I don't know. But in any event, the GM and the head coach really need to be together and in lockstep. And when you have that, you typically have better things going. Pete Carroll and John Schneider in Seattle for all those years. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch right now in San Francisco. I'm just thinking of GMs, head coaches who have that great relationship, and what kind of results do we see that come out of it? That's what he'll have to forge with Joe Shane.
The one thing they've had, at least a top 7 pick since 2018, we just showed that. That's because of 14 wins since the last 3 years. But you know this better than anybody, CD. The NFL stands for not for long. If we're looking at a turnaround here, and the leash is always short, is it 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? And given the division they're in, it's not world beaters when we're talking about the NFC East.
Yeah, look, let's just be honest about it, Brandon. I am old enough to remember almost every coach that was hired would go to the podium and talk about his 5-year plan. And we would all nod and go, okay, let's see. And they would often get the 5 years. It was kind of part of the package. We haven't had that for a while now, have we? And when you have a league as volatile as this one is, where this year, Jacksonville and New England were 4-13 in 2024, both of them. They were 13-4 in 2025. What do you think the patience level is these days? It's almost nil. They want to see you jump. Remember, Washington's 5-12 this year. You remember what they did last year, coming off of the year before? You can worst to first. You can go from worst to the playoffs. You can do it very quickly. And unfortunately, people look for it to be quick. And by the way, John Harbaugh expects the exact same thing. Let's call it 2 years, just to be fair, that they should be more than contenders for a playoff spot. And John Harbaugh won his Super Bowl in what, year 5, I believe, in Baltimore? He'd like to cut that number down in New York.
I tell you what, I'll give him 1 year because the New York media is going to expedite that a little faster there when it comes to
Brandon, do you think a year's too much? No, look, I grew up in New York State. I know the New York media just like anyone else.
He's fine.
Year.
Yeah, he's fine. Yeah, you're probably right. We'll see what happens. I mean, it's right now I-95. It's the same people. DMV, New York, we're all the same part there. Charles Davis, as always. We'll see what happens, my friend. Hey, take a look at next year in terms of the schedule and what they're facing here. Obviously, you got everybody in the NFC East. But outside of that, you got the Niners, the Jags we just mentioned there in terms of their postseason run. And then away, you got the Texans, the Rams, and Seahawks. Oh, those are all postseason teams. So let's just say Harbaugh has his hands full coming into 2026. On the other side, we got more on Harbaugh heading to the Giants. We're still following that breaking news when it comes to the Giants and John Harbaugh working on finalizing a deal to make him the new head coach of the G-Men heading into 2026. The deal is not quite done yet. The contract numbers will be out there and still negotiating on that side. Obviously, this was very quick for him, leaving Baltimore January 6th after that season-ending loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But coming their way when it comes to the Giants, a proven winner. 180 wins there over 18 seasons, and the Giants definitely need it because look at last year. The first 15 games, 2-13 there. Points per game, just a tick over 20. Opponents, almost 30. But the last 2 games, obviously 2 wins. That doesn't do much, but kind of help it shake out when in terms of those top 10 picks. And the Giants have had a boatload of those since 2018 when it comes to building that young talent. All right, Pete Prisco tapped in on the breaking news here. And, Pete, your initial reaction, of course, Harbaugh heading to the Giants.
One man's garbage is another man's treasure in the NFL. Isn't that what it is? I mean, they kick him to the curb in Baltimore, and all of a sudden he's getting reported $100 million for 5 years, $20 million a year. So, look, he has skins on the wall. And when you have skins on the wall, you become a wanted commodity. The guy has won a Super Bowl. He's done a lot of really good things in Baltimore. It just seemed to get a little stale there. And maybe change is good. We've seen this play out, by the way, over the course of history. Andy Reid in Philadelphia. He went to Super Bowls. He went to championships, and he didn't win it. And then what happens? He ends up in Kansas City and wins it. So I think this is a great deal for the Giants. I think it's a really good deal money-wise and a really good situation for John Harbaugh.
All right, so the Giants, they have their HC in place. They're still waiting on that to be finalized. But in terms of his staff, he's always been building staffs when he was in Baltimore. What are you hearing about possibility of building that offensive side and defensive side there?
Well, it sounds like he's going to take Todd Monken with him. And Todd Monken is the offensive coordinator. Maligned at times. Didn't give the ball to Derrick Henry late in the game against the New England Patriots, and people criticized him for that. He can be gruff. He has a rough exterior. He's tough on the players. And, that seemed to rub Lamar Jackson. You hear that, it rubbed Lamar Jackson the wrong way. So you go to New York. Well, Jaxson Dart is that kind of quarterback who has that thick skin. It looks like he likes to be coached hard. I think it might be a good scenario for him to get in there and work with a guy like Todd Monken, who's been around the league for a long time. He's coached at wide receiver. He's been an offensive coordinator. He's coached quarterbacks. So I think Todd Monken might be the perfect guy to go in there and really get Jaxson Dart to jumpstart his game.
Outside of that, we talk about the quick turnaround here, Pete. As you know, it's a short lease in the NFL in terms of, one, the NFC East is a winnable division. But then also you go in there with some young talent with the Giants on top of that. Joe Shane, he has his work cut out. What is the timeline do you think they have there?
Oh, you should be contending for a playoff berth next year. I mean, I think it's as simple as that. You look at it and you go, wow, why would you say that? Well, here's why. If you believe Jaxson Dart's the guy, and I think he is, then you have your quarterback. You have a really good left tackle in Andrew Thomas. You need some work on the other spots on the offensive line. Don't forget, they're getting Neighbors back. They're getting Scadaboo back. They have some guys who have talent on that side of the ball. Then you move it over to the other side of the ball. Man, you got a lot of talent there. What he's going to do with Abdul Carter is incredible. He'll go in there and instill discipline. He will not get away with what he got away with last year. And by the way, he was really good at the end of last year. You have a lot of pass rushers. Brian Burns, outstanding. Dexter Lawrence in the middle. I think this team has a good front seven. They need work on the back end, but this team is not far away. It's a great situation for John Harbaugh.
Pete, you know this better than anybody. The Giants have been a long way away from their glory days in terms of the Super Bowls that Tom Coughlin had not too long ago. Well, very long ago. But in terms of having that type of coach, that winning mentality there, when you think about it, the Giants, you take a look at it there since Coughlin, the span through 2004 and 15, 102 wins. Since then, 55. I mean, it's plain and simple. Why was this the only move that the Giants needed to make in terms of turning this around?
When you go back to when they went and got Coughlin, Coughlin was one of those guys. He had success in Jacksonville, didn't win a Super Bowl, but was close to winning it twice. And so you went there and you said, okay, we're going to go get a coach who will instill discipline and has had success at another spot. In the past, they haven't done that recently, and I think that's why this makes sense for them. You go back to that Coughlin hire, it worked. He won 2 Super Bowls there. What did he do? He brought discipline. The players hated him when he got there. By the end, they loved him. Now, he had to pull back a little bit, and that made sense. Now, Harbaugh doesn't coach with the same rigid style that Coughlin did. You can't get away with that anymore. But he will bring a toughness to that team. And by the way, players respect success. If he walked in off the street and he didn't have any success, they would look at him and go, who is this guy? Well, they know him now as John Harbaugh, Super Bowl winner. It's been a while, but it was a Super Bowl winner. He's had success lately, just couldn't get over the hump. So I think when you come there with that reputation and that resume, players will respond to that. I think that's exactly what the Giants needed.
How important was this for the ownership side, the Mara family, of course? All the years of struggling to make this a contending team. They just had to get this right as well.
Oh, no question about it. And this is a legacy franchise. When you think of the NFL, you think of the New York Giants as one of those flagship, franchises. They've had great success. It took them a while, but they finally had it. And I think they need to get back to that. And so if you're the Mara family, I think this is a great hire for you. It's a great hire for the organization. But that's why I think this was done the way it was done. They set their target. They set what they would pay, and they went really high with the pay, and they said, we're getting our guy, and we're not allowing him to go other places to get an opportunity to maybe let those franchises win him over. So I think they did a fantastic job of getting this done quickly. It's the first hire. It's the right hire.
First horse out the stable there when it comes to that, getting that done in terms of hiring their head coach. Obviously, we're thinking more of a timetable of like what Jacksonville did this past season and playoff push. But I want you to give me the grades from both sides here. We're looking at Harbaugh's side of it. What would you get the grade in terms of this deal?
For him, it's an A. It's the best job out there. And I said that when all the coaching jobs opened up. And people say, well, what are you saying? What's the Giants? It's the New York Giants. I mean, you're in New York. And not only that, you have a lot of young talent on that team to build around. If you look at the NFL, what do you want? You want a quarterback and you want pass rushers. Well, they have it. If you believe in Jaxson Dart, and I think he can be successful, then you have the quarterback and the pass rushers. So it makes sense from that standpoint. So from his standpoint, it's an A. From the Giants' standpoint, A+. You targeted him, you went and got him, and now it's all on you to make sure it works around him. So I think this is a no-brainer hire for both sides. If I was John Harbaugh, that's the job I would want. If I were the New York Giants, John Harbaugh's the guy I would want.
So an A for Harbaugh, A+ for the Giants. If we're looking at other teams that were hoping to maybe, woo him to their organizations, how does this impact the coaching carousel? You're missing out on a Hall of Fame coach. How does that impact others looking for the next HC?
Look, do your due diligence, hire the best guy for your organization. Maybe John Harbaugh wouldn't have been the best guy for that organization. And I think you look at some of the wide nets these teams are casting. I mean, take a look at the Titans. They're interviewing everybody, which I give them respect for, by the way. If I was in the interview process, I would interview as many as these guys as I can. I'd want to get a feel for them. I'd also pick their brains. If they come in with a list of 10 guys they're going to hire as coaches, who's going to be your coordinator? Well, if they bring a name in there that I hadn't heard, I'm going to go to the guy I might hire and say, have you heard him? Are you interested in him? So I think what you do and what the Titans are doing is exactly what I would do, is I pick the brain as many as I could and hire the right one.
We will see. Now we are up to 8 openings across the NFL and plenty of time the closer we get to the end of this week and into the offseason. So we'll see what happens. Pete Prisco, appreciate your time. Join us at Breaking News that John Harbaugh will be the head coach of the New York Giants.